All right. So before we start this interview, I want to thank you for joining this interview with me today. I really appreciate it. So
Absolutely.
first of all, could you sort of introduce yourself and also your background, just let people to know who you are?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me on to talk about this tough conversation, but a conversation that needs to be had. My name is Gale Nelson. I am a recent graduate at Johnson Wales University, studied sports entertainment and event management, and I'm an activist. I really enjoy talking to people about social justice. I've worked in a nonprofit right under my dad as well, and just it's about humanity, and we want this conversation to be a free-flowing conversation to talk about the importance of social justice in this country, but more importantly around the world.
Right. So as an African American living in the United States, have you ever experienced racial discrimination in your life? Could you share with us a little bit?
Absolutely. um, Racial discrimination for me, there's been quite a few instances,
Mhm.
right? So there was a situation where I was going to a school, actually in Florida, and the school, I was kicked out of my finance class because I used to show up about 1 or 2 minutes late. I was never tardy, right? I was never absent. I would show up literally right on time or 1 or 2 minutes late.
Mhm.
Never had like a big 10-minute gap or 15-minute gap to class. And my professor, who was a predominantly white professor, uh, he he told me that I can't come back to class anymore. And I was making a B average in the class, and there were other people in the class as well that weren't going to class, had much worse grades, and he let them stay in the class. Mind you, I was the only Black or African American in that class,
Uh-huh.
and when he told me that you can't come back,
Mhm.
it I was confused. I
Right.
didn't understand like as to why that made sense, because I was making the grade, right? I had a B average. I would show up, I mean, 1 to 2 minutes late, you know,
Mhm.
and that wasn't every day. That was just in a few instances. So when he
Mhm.
kicked me out, it just made me realize the injustice that he, you know, felt that needed to be uh, said
Right.
in that class. So that was one of many instances that I've experienced. Um, it it's been a very interesting
Mhm.
journey for me, being Black in America and just understanding our role as Black men in America.
Yeah. And following the question I just asked you, like every time when you face this racial discrimination, how do you deal with it? How do you face it?
The most important thing is understanding the laws. I think that when we are educated about how the system works and how
Mhm.
laws work, then we could react, in a much more civil way.
Right.
For me, I have had, thank God, that I've acted in every instance in a civil way and not trying to combat fire with fire.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that doesn't make anything but build more fire. So whenever I was in a situation like that, I had to tell myself, one, you have to be calm and cool, right?
Right.
And two, understand the laws and understand how the system works so that you can
Mhm.
combat it in a very strategic way.
Right. And in your opinion, like what's the most common misunderstanding that towards to Black community?
The biggest common misunderstanding, that's a great question as well, I believe is no one's really educated on how Black people are really treated in this country,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Everyone has a certain, I would say, ignorance, if you will, a certain
Mhm.
ignorance to not learning because it was a painful past. So like
Right.
something like slavery, right?
Mhm.
Slavery is a very hard subject to talk about,
Yeah.
especially in the classroom and period. So when people shy away from it, that kind of gives them the clearance that, yeah, it happened, but let's not address it. Let's just keep it there,
Mhm.
right? So uh, the biggest problem is people aren't educated and they don't want to be educated. So I challenge everybody here today to educate yourself on what it's like to be Black in America, and
Hmm.
talk to people like myself that will give you, real time and real just putting them in your shoes, right?
Right. So like with the recent issues about tragic deaths about George Floyd, I'm sure you have seen news everywhere about this. What's your personal opinion about this issue?
Yeah, man. First off, my condolences to George Floyd's family. It is a very, very touchy subject. Um, Honestly, enough is enough, Yoshi. And
It is.
there's been too many instances where a lot of Black people have been specifically targeted in how police deal with people, right? So when a policeman deals with a white man or somebody that's not Black, it's a lot different than when they deal with Black men. So
Yeah.
um, it's a very touchy situation. I think that it needs to be addressed to the fullest extent and not shied away from, because for far too long we've let things like that slide.
Right. And like we have seen people are posting social justice, Black Lives Matter movement on social media, and also they're doing like protests on the street. Personally, for you, have you done anything supporting for the Black Lives Matter movement in your life?
Absolutely. And just to kind of clear the air, Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean that Black lives are more important than anybody
Yeah,
else, right?
definitely.
Because of this country, this country was told Black people that we were 3/5 of a human,
Hmm.
right? So if we're not seen as a whole human, then we don't matter. So that's where this whole Black Lives Matter came from, right?
Right.
For me personally, I've worked directly with my dad. He
Mhm.
runs Big Brothers Big Sisters, and he's had community conversations where he's talked to Black and our allies
Mhm.
about just the reality of race, relationships, and resources, because these are conversations that need to be had. And when they're not, we're doing ourselves and our fellow mankind injustice.
That's a great answer. Um, well, I think the last question I'm going to ask you, well, it's not a question, but more towards to, is there any messages you want to send it to the people from all over the world, that somebody that may not know about social justice, racial justice? Is there any messages you want to send it to them?
Absolutely. My biggest message is educate.
Right.
Find ways that you can become educated. Um, Google. I know that we're living in a very technological time, so access to internet is a lot easier
Right.
nowadays. But even if it's not, find ways through your local government, if you can, to just understand the history of Black people in America and what we're doing today to try to make real systemic change. So educate, educate, educate.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a really great interview that I've done so far. Um, Also with
Absolutely.
others. Yeah, I feel amazed. I feel I'm being also educated by your answer. Well, I guess that's all for my questions about this whole interview. Thank you so much for joining with me today. I really appreciate it again. All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.